Welcome back. We're here with Gina and with Brian, and we're going to have a conversation about the next chapter in Collins's book, which is titled The Hedgehog Principle. Okay. Hedgehog principle. What does that even mean to you? That's sort of a weird kind of term in business conversations. So why? What does that mean to you?
Gina, you wanna?
Well, for Hedgehog, for me, is really a simple way of doing things. Knowing what you're doing, having piercing clarity about that, and moving forward in a direction that makes sense. But finding that at its core is where the investigative process happens. And being simplified in that process really helps you to identify that more easily. So for me, it's about, figuring out what you're going to do best, what you're passionate about, and understanding what drives that. And everyone having a deep understanding of all three of those combined to find that sweet spot, I call it, for your Hedgehog Concept, and really only deal with opportunities and growth or whatever the case may be surrounding that concept and framework only.
Okay. Hedgehog. Just like
Yeah, Hedgehog Concept. I mean, the visual here that I'm sure everybody's seen with the three concentric circles overlapping in the center, where this, as Gina pointed out, the sweet spot is about finding this passion about what you do best, right? And then this business of the economic engine that drives the whole thing, and when you combine those three powerful forces, that's where you really get into the accelerator that drives you up to the next level.
Do you recall why he comes up with the name Hedgehog Principle? What's the story behind it?
I believe there's a story with the hedgehog and the fox.
Right,
And for several times and days, the fox tried to catch the hedgehog, and the hedgehog would do what it does best, which is simple. Foil up and use its quills, as you would, to protect itself. So it knows that, it does it one thing, it does it very well, it knows how to do it like the back of its hand, and it does that, protects itself, to live, to fight another day, and to endure and go further.
So I think it's important to understand also that these metaphors are meaningful, right? Because they're simple. We can understand them. It's not typical business language, right? But you'll find that in organizations, people use this language and it resonates. So students, that's also why we're looking at this book. We're looking at this book because these metaphors that Collins is using, they resonate with many people in business organizations. So you can use this language, the vocabulary, to actually make your point, should you be employed in one or the other organization. So let's go back to what that means, the three concentric circles, right? What are some of the big pieces that we could point to that Collins is pointing out that traditional businesses aren't really focused on?
We're really identifying your core purpose, your value. Why do you exist?
Why
do you exist? If no one else in the world were able to do anything, you serve one singular important function. And identifying that, asking that question, answering that question is key to really driving what are you deeply passionate about, and having that understanding, and then that leads to understanding your core values and a purpose.
Great.
One of the things that I reflect on this is you have to have a deep appreciation of yourself to be able to contribute to an organization, and understanding what you're passionate about, and then finding a organization that lines up with those values is important. And it goes back to getting the right people on the bus, and starting with the right people. That's something that I reflect on in my own entrepreneurial experience, and finding that when we've done our best, it was because we had the right people on the bus, and they were doing the things that they're passionate about and what they're good at too. We some of the worst mistakes we've made in business has been when we ask people to do stuff that they, not as a criticism, not capable of doing. It just wasn't part of their skill set. It wasn't their strength. That puts people in a position of anxiety and stress, and that it's not helpful to the overall purpose of the organization.
Do you think this hedgehog concept is applicable to organizations only, or is there something that can be applied to you as a person?
I think so. I think it can be applied to your purpose. You know, to your point about having your own individual purpose, connecting that to your mission, because I think that then informs you of what is appropriate for you as a job skill set. You know, I think it's important, you know, with the right people on the bus, but it's also, are you capable of doing X, Y, and Z? And if you aren't, then we need to move you another seat on the bus. It doesn't necessarily mean off the bus, but another seat. So I think that helps. I think you have to be clear about what you're passionate about, because what you're passionate about helps to motivate you. It helps to drive some of these things that as you're building an organization that becomes greater, beyond money, beyond anything else, that's what drives you. So if you're not passionate about it, it's hard to get up in the morning and do it every day.
Is that a conversation that you typically hear, though, in business? Organizations asking people, what are you passionate about?
I don't think so.
No, you get I've seen a lot of organizations with the culture of you serve at the will of the rest of the organization. You're an employee. If you're you can be seen as a complainer, and that's very common.
Right. What about you? In the nonprofit area, are you being asked in job interviews, like, what is your passion?
I think now we're doing that because I think, you know, it's a time and expense when you interview someone, you think they're the right fit and they don't work out. So I think taking that extra step to not only do you fit the job description, do you fit the culture of the organization? Are you passionate about our mission? You know, do you have a personal story that may resonate as to why you are? And I think that's important. I think that drives people and helps your organization to build upon something to become great.
So, students, I want to turn over to you just to think about this hedgehog principle. It is coming as an organizational level principle, but it may be actually informing on an individual level as well. And I'm just going to open this up to you. Is like, in what way would this be helpful? Where would you start if you wanted to create your own hedgehog principle, your own, as you were mentioning, sweet spot of why you're doing what you're doing, why do you exist, right? Answering the question that Simon Sinek is asking, like the power of why. It's like, why do you, why are you here, right? It's an existential question. It's a big question. But in fact, it's a question that everybody's asking at one point in time, or they're trying to avoid it, right? And that excellence oftentimes comes from people confronting the brutal fact of that question being there and understanding, you know, I want to find an answer to it. And so where would you suggest is a powerful starting point for students to think about that?
So doing this in my own business, you know, we as we grew as a company, you know, we had a collection of different capabilities, and you know, not all of them necessarily match up, and how we started growing as a company. So we went through this process of asking ourselves, why do we exist? And we as the leadership team came up with we're problem solvers, and that's what we do. That's why we exist. Is we solve problems for our clients, and you know, that was an interesting self-discovery with our whole leadership team to go through that exercise and figure that out. And but you know, everything we do fits under that umbrella of like we solve problems for our clients.
How does that resonate with you? Maybe on this organizational level, but also on the individual level. Where would you start? Which of the circles would you start answering first?
For me, I think it's why do I exist? What am I passionate about? What do I bring to the organization on an individual level, and what am I contributing on an overall organization? I think, you know, it's not only, you know, what the organization is doing, but how are you contributing to that in the best way? And if I'm not passionate, I haven't identified what that sweet spot is, I'm not, therefore, to some degree, not as effective in my job as I can be. So for me, it's about, why am I here? What specific skill set do I have that contributes to the organizational effectiveness?
Well, let me turn to you, students, because I think this is a very critical moment of the conversation. It's that you start with the why on a personal level. And we've talked about this in various other contexts, but this is the deeper sort of human question that we're all asking in some way. And those people that are individually excellent, that organizations that are excellent, teams that are excellent, they have an answer for why they are, why they exist, what they're doing. And it speaks to the drive to comprehend. which is so critically important for us as a species. We call ourselves Homo sapiens, but we are able to think abstractly, and the question why is driving this abstract thinking. When we make tools, when we solve problems, anytime this is behind. The question why is behind it. And modern management is really a way to look at this additional question, the why question, and finding ways to address it. And I think the power of Collins comes in where it's like, okay, start with passion. And students, I want to ask you, how many times have you been asked, what are you passionate about? How many times have you heard that in an interview? Some of you might have heard it, some of you might not. But to me, I also want to draw out, this may be the accessing point for excellence, is that when you start asking that question first, then you can come to the other concentric circles. So if you start and you have an idea of what you're passionate about, can you just share with us what you're passionate about? What have you sort of discovered in this journey of life?
Well, a few things. I'm good at managing people and processes, and I recognize that. You know, I'm a leader in that sense.
And is that your passion, or is that what you're good at or best at?
I think that's a good question, because again, you always have to ask yourself the why, the why, the why. And for me, to me, that input, the output result is I'm able to, move business goals or drive the needle for change or help someone in terms of effectiveness for a process that they may not have, used and utilized before. So I'm passionate about helping people, and I think in doing that, developing processes, managing people, I'm doing that in that way, and that's what I'm passionate about.
So if you're fine, do you have a similar kind of passion? Is that like you're accessing that?
I have a passion for building teams, and I enjoy doing that, and within inside our own company, that's what I focus on, is building teams and building teams internally and externally.
Okay. So what I'm hearing, though, I want to just reflect on that. What you're now saying is you're passionate about is not necessarily about the why, it's about the what, right? Building teams is a what, right? Yeah. And managing and organizing is also a what. What is underlying this? Like, why would you even care about teams? Why would you care about like managing, right? That's sort of, I think, where Collins can get us, is saying, what is it that you're truly passionate about? It seems like you must know something, because you're already very good at building teams, right? Or managing people. That's sort of the second circle is, okay, this is what you might be best at or want to be best at, right? That's why you create value for your clients, or why you create value for your organization. And then you probably can monetize this, right? That's why you're paid, right? That's the financial engine, right? So oftentimes we are much more clear about what's the financial engine, what drives our financial engine, and what we do, like what we're good at and what we can become best at. But the more clearer articulation of why we're doing what we're doing, the passion piece, is oftentimes not so clear. So I just want to start this as a reflection process, because I think this is very critical in terms of understanding the power of this hedgehog concept. Because it's not like something, I'm passionate about like computers.
Right.
Well, people are passionate about a product, possibly, but it's actually the answer to what.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Similar to what Cynic was saying. Yeah, a company can produce computer, and typically it starts there, and it tells you how they're doing it. So they're answering the question of what and how, but they rarely formulate a why. And I think that the culture is actually not allowing us for a comfortable language around why we're doing what we're doing, right? And it's much more comfortable to say what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I think in modern management, I just want to voice this out for my students as well, is getting increasingly comfortable with answering this question why, and asking it too. And Collins does allow a vocabulary here, and sees that plays out in the context of excellent organizations, that they have a clarity of why they're doing what they're doing, what are they passionate about, right? What else does resonate with you in this chapter on the hedgehog?
I think, understanding what drives us. I think it's different from a nonprofit versus a business because we have to use our resources differently. And I think that's important because, you can identify the why, know how you're going to get there or what you're going to do, but how do you get there? And recognizing what strengths you can play to that, other drivers that can help. If we don't have the money, do we have a wonderful volunteer force that can help us execute on some things? So I really like the fact that it's, understanding of exactly not only what you're deeply passionate about, but what's going to drive that once you identify that.
One of the interesting things I found was how sometimes the circles can be in conflict with each other. Like, for example, in my business, I said, our passion is fixing problems. But what do people that fix problems find is they find more problems. And sometimes that causes us problems in our economic engine because we end up fixing problems for free, and they which is not necessarily a bad thing, but we need to account for it. So anyway, I found that interesting how sometimes they can actually be in conflict with each other.
There's something about discipline that you mentioned at the very beginning that this hedgehog concept requires, right?
Right.
Do you recall what he was sort of mentioning in terms of the discipline to...
Well, you want to have disciplined thought, be able to have Pearson clarity on what you're going to do and only do that and do that one singular thing very well.
And which includes what?
And having the discipline to choose... you may not to do certain opportunities. Right. You may have to shun certain opportunities. You may not be able to do everything you want to do because you're best in the world at this particular singular thing, and you're staying focused on that and have a tunnel vision to do so.
I think this is very, very important to just acknowledge. Is like there are certain things that you can do, and there are many things you could do.
Right.
But for these organizations that achieve excellence, they are actually very clear of what not to do, even though they could.
Right.
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 And this is discipline. Right? Because we could eat a lot, right? Or we could grow a lot, or we have an opportunity over here or over there. And it's like, oh, okay, well, let's go back to why we exist. Where is our sweet spot? It's like, oh, you know what? We have a stop doing list here. We're going to create this and saying, no. And this is very tough. This is very tough for people, right?
Right.
When an opportunity arises, say, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to do this. Well, no, it's great. It's a great opportunity. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, right? And these organizations that Collins observed, it's like, no, they are very, very tempted possibly, but then they say no. And they say no only because they have this clarity, as you were saying, the disciplined thought. It's like, okay, this is what we are contributing. We all, as people that are the right people, decided on that. We keep repeating this, we keep reinforcing this. We're very good at this, and we're not good at this. Actually, they may be good at many other things, but because they're striving for excellence, they want to be great at something and not good at something. So good is the enemy of great in that context, and saying no to opportunities is oftentimes the manifestation of this discipline. Do you note that in some way in your practical experience, how hard it is to say no? Or
in some of my clients, I mean, you see, and even in our own organization, we do this. Is there's things that we have to deliberately choose not to do to optimize what we do best. You have a fixed pool of resources, right? So like if you have to apply those to what you do best and make sure you don't do the other things. And that, to your earlier point, that is a very hard thing for people to do, especially if they've been doing it for a long time. Yeah.
And I think for, in a nonprofit world, to sit there and say no to an opportunity that equated with money, that's hard. I think, we're used to saying, okay, it works, okay, we get paid for it, it helps maybe serve our mission, let's do it. So, but then you're in a situation where you're going to have to say no to some of those things. It doesn't fit within the concept. You have to be very disciplined to make sure that any ideas, any opportunities fit within that framework and be clear about that. And you may have to miss out on opportunities, potential, growth, brand, whatever that may be, but it's worth it because you're being great at one thing only.
And that, as students, really is I think the crux of this chapter. It's like anybody could find a hedgehog. Anybody is, that's the assumption, passionate about something. Anybody knows what they could be good at and what potentially they could be great at. Let's say it's managing teams, or it's creating teams, managing teams, etc. And then the financial engine is almost like an afterthought. Whereas typically, we start with the financial engine conversation. In traditional business, we start with how can we make money? Like you were saying in the example of the NGO, okay, well, we can get this funded.
Right.
It also may have helped our mission in some way. Okay, we can do it. All right, let's maybe do it. It's the inverse thought process oftentimes for these excellent organizations suggesting it's like, okay, how does this fit with why we exist? How does this play into the passion that we have? How does it help us be the best, become better at what we do? And yes, how are we going to monetize this? Because it's critical. Yeah? And then there are some things that fall out of these three circles, but those opportunities that are left over that are sort of fulfilling that in that sweet spot, they can help the organization to become excellent. They can help an individual to become excellent, I would argue. So in this context, we're looking at the Hedgehog concept as a metaphor for how an organization can become excellent. I would also argue that this is a metaphor for understanding individual level excellence, and you can understand that throughout teams and other types of organizations as well. The notion of passion and what you're passionate about reflects the conversation that we had with about Simon Sinek and the power of why. It also reflects back to the need for the drive to comprehend, for us to make meaning in a meaningful way. Right? And this is something that is typically not talked about in traditional management, in traditional business organizations, where the focus is much more on the financial engine, is how much are you making, how much are you going to make, and on the what, how are you going to do it, like what are you going to do, what are the products. So traditional management is stuck in the what and the how, the effectiveness and the efficiency. And more modern management brings in the why, which we call ethics or passion, or the higher reason for existence. So I want to leave you with these thoughts to ponder, and then we're going to continue this conversation later on.